Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Oduga, and I am the Public Programs and Exhibitions Manager at Art and Practice. Thank you for joining us for this virtual program, Artist Talk, Greg Ito. Today, I'll be joined by Los Angeles-based artist, Greg Ito. Greg is an artist whose work I whose work I discovered in Los Angeles, viewing it at various different gallery spaces in my time, kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do in art. Greg, I'll hand it off to you.
Hey, nice to see you, Joshua. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. This is super awesome. I'm really happy to have a chance to kind of dive more into my personal journey as an artist. It's kind of the direction I hope to take with this time with you. Kind of like give people a little bit of more background on where I came from, my time in San Francisco, and my time being back in LA where I was born and raised, and just been developing my practice here since moving back.
yeah, definitely. I'm so excited to get into all of that stuff. Greg and I have been meeting in person and having a few different conversations about his art practice and kind of where we both are in our lives. So I'm really excited to kind of start off by talking about that early journey for you when you were in San Francisco and making work, and you were there for school, correct?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in LA. I went to high school at Venice High School, and that's kind of where my journey into wanting to become an artist began. I grew up around art, so my family has always been pretty artistic. My uncle is an artist. His name's Peter Shire. My grandfather was a craftsman, and my grandmother was a seamstress, and my aunt was an animator, so watching her draw all the time was really influential. And we also had an architect in the family, someone in visual effects for movies. My dad did calligraphy, and my mom also liked doing her crafts. So, we had a very kind of like artistic upbringing, but my parents were also pharmacists. So, you know, they always supported me doing art, but they never really thought I would like want to become an artist. It's kind of like a little bit of a joke in the beginning. But that's where I like first went to this program called CISA. It's called the California State Summer School of Art. It's at Cal Arts, and you go during like your 11th or 12th grade in high school, and staying on the campus at Cal Arts and taking like college level classes like with professors who are working artists in LA really opened my eyes. And I think that was like one of the moments where I was like, okay, I really want to go to school for art. So after finishing up high school, I ended up going to San Francisco Art Institute, SFAI, in 2008, I believe.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3 years in school, and that was like a really, really amazing experience. That campus is like completely magical, and the way that they run their school is pretty like, no boundaries, and like they were the first new genres department in the country, and a lot of amazing artists have went there and also taught there. And I was just really interested in San Francisco just as a place. I really loved it. It's such the opposite of like the LA landscape. It's like really small and dense. So anyways, I went there for school. After school, I did some time on a couple of endeavors outside of my artistic practice. So I started a gallery. I co-founded a gallery called the Evergold. And I also co-founded an art magazine called San Francisco Arts Quarterly, as well as, doing my curatorial work and being an artist. And that was like such an amazing period because it's such a small city and the community is so tightly knit that you can really kind of bounce around and work with all the artists that work in the Bay Area, as well as, show in different pockets of the city. Yeah. But I started having some creative differences with like my collaborator, and it just kind of like you kind of come to this moment where you're like, well, I'm doing so much work in San Francisco, but it didn't feel genuine to me because I really missed LA. And I think at that point in my life, I was like pretty unhappy with how things were going artistically for my own artwork because I still knew what ideas I was into, but my artwork, the way I approached my practice kept kind of changing and I wasn't really sure what direction I wanted to go into. And then mentally, I was just in kind of a darker place that
Yeah,
time. So
definitely.
I
I have
was,
a question for you, actually
uh,
related. Do you think because you were doing so much work to like, show other people's artwork, whether it was in print or whether it was, in the various exhibition projects that you were working on, do you think that that influenced that mode of thinking that you were thinking about? Like kind of feeling angsty about your own practice or thinking about ways to level up or just change things a little bit?
yeah, I think where my most enthusiasm came from was just bringing people together and like curating really cool shows and working with artists that I really enjoyed working with. But my collaborator at the time wanted to, we needed to make money to run the business. And it was consuming so much of our time that like, we had to try and get paid for the work that we were doing. And so the programming and like, the intention shifted to more of like it needed to, needed to make money. So I wasn't really into that. I wanted it to just be this like cool artist run thing and runs off the support of like people's donations and the occasional sales once in a while. But
Yeah, totally.
um, it, you know, I feel like with anything, if you do a lot of work and you don't really get much back in return, if you're putting out that energy, like I guess feeling resentment is like kind of natural. But I really was just like I was battling other things at that time,
Mhm.
and I just needed to like figure out what my like I just needed to reground myself, and so I stepped away from those endeavors and I just kind of like kept making art. But a friend of mine, his name is Nate Hooper, who I'm good friends with still. We started this like curatorial project called Moroso Projects, and we only did 4 shows. We did like quarterly shows. But that was really fun because it was like a space that someone's like, hey, I love what you guys do. He had a space that he was running at the time with one of his business partners, and that relationship shifted. So we were both kind of like free at that time, but we're like, man, we still want to like put on cool shows. So we did curate some shows together, which was like amazing and fun. And it was like, I really felt reconnected to like that like experience of just like being excited about putting together shows.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. And you showed me some really great images of shows that you put together during that time. Should we jump into those right now?
Yeah, so when after San Francisco, I kind of came back to LA and I used, the experience that I had in San Francisco of like, curating and building and installing and, shipping like all these shows. And I got a job at a gallery in Los Angeles where I became their like head of production and head prep. So these are just a few of the shows that I was worked on just to show the scope of the installation. And these are just a few of my favorite shows that I worked on because they were more immersive. There are sculptural elements as well as flat works. They involve like a lot of labor. So this is some progress shots of the show I did for Popel. And so you know, moving back to LA and jumping into this job to put together these like pretty incredible exhibitions, production wise, I just loved how they were like fabricated and put together and just the level of intentions of the artists I was working with. And they transformed into these beautifully detailed, considered, almost theatrical um, installations. And this is one of my most favorite shows that I worked on at this space. Um,
Yeah, these are all really beautiful images. And it's really great to hear, hearing
mhm.
your story, hearing about you going to school, having that experience that you were having, and then coming back here to LA and really applying that. and applying it at a really high level, like to be doing shows with Hopel and some of these other shows that you were doing. That's really great to hear. And then I also very much, as a person that's such a fan of your work, I can see how this experience has influenced the way that you think about the work that you're making and how you're presenting it in different spaces. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But there's a few more images of these.
Yeah, and I just loved how they were like, you know, they almost seemed like a score, you know, like each room, each section that you would go into all connected in this way, and they all had their own moments and melodies and harmonies.
Yeah.
So during this time, I was working on a bunch of new paintings, and this was the beginning of like these paintings I called Vignette Series, and they're originally inspired off of Mark Rothko's paintings, and SF MoMA has this one that's like incredible. It has like a orangey reddish section up top and a blue or deeper blue section on the bottom, and kind of this like purple background. And you know, it was one of these paintings where I was just sitting in front of before I left San Francisco, and I was like, man, I love this painting. It just makes me, you know, it really evoked an emotional response from me. And when I came back to LA, I wanted to figure out how to lay all of these moments and symbols and memories onto the canvas to evoke the same kind of visual or that same emotional response. So I had these vignette paintings where the top sections would have like a hand gesture and the bottom sections would have these symbols. And you can kind of see how I was building the content of the painting through these like mood boards of just like printing out paper and just pinning them up and just kind of seeing how they would fit. So some of the symbols I was interested in back then was like the hourglass and this vessel that has the two faces facing each other in the silhouette. And I started off with 3, and this ended up being my first opportunity to build an exhibition from the ground up on my own. So the gallery that I worked for, they actually had like an artist that canceled their show, or like they weren't able to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so they had this open slot with a very like tight timeline, and the girl who worked there at the time, she was like, hey, what about Greg? You know, his paintings are really cool. Why don't we show his stuff? And the owner was like, all right, like let's give Greg the project room. So he gave me this opportunity to do this show in the project room. So this was the first time I could actually build an exhibition from the ground up, figure out what kind of paintings I wanted to paint and what kind of objects I wanted in the room and what kind of mood I wanted to build. And at that time in LA, next slide, you know, I just being back in LA, you know, it's just seeing all these fires everywhere that was going on, like just these moments in LA, like the fires rising, the helicopters, like the, you know, like the seasons of like, you know, summer being extremely hot. But whenever I would see these smoke rising from the horizon, or like a car that exploded on the side of the street, it really made me think about omens, you know, like things that are to come, or, you know, like if smoke is rising on the horizon, you know, is it either a smoke signal from someone trying to get your attention, or is it like something disastrous that happened? And I like that duality of these fire pillars. And next slide. So I started playing with these, like, you know, the image of the island and then having this boat in flames, you know, or the next slide. Yeah, the perfect kind of homestead cabin on flames. And, you know, I was moving back to LA and I was really trying to piece together my life again. Because again, I was like coming from San Francisco, you know, just kind of coming from like a bad part of my life where I just like really was battling a lot of demons, you know, and I just needed to be back home and be close to family and just like reground myself, because I kind of like lost a piece of myself in SF when I just wasn't happy with the things that I was doing. So
Yeah.
it ends up being a little self-destructive at times. So yeah, I was thinking about home, and so that painting progressed into this work. This was like one of my first vignette paintings that I was really happy with. I actually still have it right here in my studio.
Yeah.
And
We might have to talk about that after, because this was the first work of yours that I actually remember seeing.
oh, okay, cool. Yeah, like thank you. It's just such a special memory for me. I was thinking about home and coming back home and feeling so blessed to like have a home. And when things aren't working out in the city that you put so much energy into, and you kind of hit a ceiling, I kind of like, I felt in a way defeated, or at least like time is ticking. Like I need to like come home, get my workflow going, get my studio practice going, make stuff, and just really focus on growing my like artistic practice. And I
Yeah.
was totally like not trying to do a magazine, not trying to do like a gallery space. I wasn't trying to have any kind of partnerships at that time. It was just too much. But I love like these hands, like the gesture of the hands. Like I wanted to make these paintings that were really crisp and very kind of compartmentalized, almost diagrammatic in a way, where it's like, here's a symbol of time, here's a image of a house burning, and here is like a gesture. And I was thinking like, with my paintings, there's no painterly gestures.
Mm-hmm.
It's all hidden within like the technical way of just being really precise and clean.
Yeah.
And so the only gesture that I can bring into these paintings were the hand gestures. So I was seeing them as like a performative or theatrical gesture.
Yeah, totally. I mentioned this to you when we first met and we talked. I talked about seeing your work and trying to figure out those stories, like really obsessively looking at the work and trying to piece it together in a way. Hearing this from you, it's so great to hear, because it's like, the intention behind it. We also talked about the cleanliness of your work and all of that as well. So it's really great to hear from you how that intention also plays into the story that you're trying to tell as well. That's
Right.
like, it's great.
Yeah, like how do I like, what do I place, what moments do I place in front of the viewer for them to try and connect the dots, and what kind of color field do they exist in to like for them to connect those dots within, like how does their personal experience shape their experience with the artwork, almost like a dream, like you wake up from a dream and you only remember like this moment and that moment and that moment. You leave the rest of your day just kind of like thinking like, what was that about? Like, like I'm obviously going through something, for me to take a second look.
And then
So
these other elements start to make itself into the work. And I feel like what you just said is a really great transition into this.
yeah, so just like the experience of building the exhibitions with other artists, I've always loved artists that had the ability to work in multiple mediums and make everything flow, even though that their work, the different bodies of work, don't look exactly alike. Like Urs Fischer's show at MoCA, the one with like the raindrops falling and like the bread house and the floating fruit, like to like his clay like carnival like free-for-all thing over at the Geffen. Like that was like so amazing, because it just showed how like pure and playful and like amazing art is. It's so essential to life, to living, at least for me. I'm a very creative person and a very visual person, so I use art to really figure out you know figure out my life, like the steps going into my life, the steps that I've already taken, where I'm standing now. And at this time of my life, I was dating my wife, Karen, and she was my girlfriend at the time. And I was like coming back from, almost being burned, you know, or feeling burned from my
Mhm.
time in the Bay Area and coming back to LA and finding romance. So that's why these candlestick um, holders have the two faces, you know, just like that source material for the painting that was taped on the wall.
Yeah.
So I started using other fabricators and applying all the experience and infusing that into my practice. Because I was like, the only way for me to actually do these things is for me to actually do these things. So I had to like start building stuff, contacting fabricators, like managing. This was the moment where I started managing my studio like more like a business. You know, I still had a primary job to help pay the bills, but you know, I wanted to expand my practice. So
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear how closely that's tied to your personal life. Like a lot of people are like, I'm gonna make art and I'm gonna establish a studio practice. And I think, from the other conversations that we've had, the things that you're going through, meeting your current partner, and having all of that and that informing you, I'm gonna make work in this specific way. That definitely comes across for me in the work that you're
yeah, I found out that like making work that connects to like your life is one easier to talk about. You
doing.
know, like I'm not trying to talk about any critical theory or fill the work with any, you know, abstract meaning, or you know, I don't really do research based work. It's all a reflection of like my life and things that I experience, things that I think are interesting, and also later on it starts to take a turn to include more of my family history and stuff. So these are painted, and this is just kind of how I started building the exhibition. So I made the paintings, I painted the walls, I built this table that has the same form as the candlestick holder, and you can see it in the lower left corner
Yeah,
of the
go
painting.
back to show the candle as
So
well.
I loved how things started echoing um, with one another, you know,
Mhm.
um, to create this like full experience. And when I started installing, this was when I could take all of my expertise and put it together. So those lights I installed, you know, that's just with white. I ended up gelling those. So I started using like surface treatments a lot more in the work. And, you know, this is kind of like some progress photos of like my first LA debut, you know, and that's with the gels on and the dramatic lighting. And then this is with the paintings up and the candlesticks on, and you know,
Came together really nicely.
thank you. Yeah, I'm still really proud of this show, you know, because it has three paintings, one on each wall. It has this kind of installation moment in the corner, these sculptural elements that connect to the works. And it's just like, yeah, it was one of those moments that I really felt like I was doing something genuine to me, you know. And in San Francisco I didn't feel that way. I think it's because I wasn't grounded in San Francisco. You know, I'm not from San Francisco. I just did a lot of stuff up there, and I still always felt I still felt as like an outcast at times, you know. And also San Francisco was changing, man. Like by the time I was leaving, the tech boom was happening, people were leaving, galleries were closing, 49 Geary closed, which was like a huge hub, you know. And yeah, things were just shifting a lot. So this show is pretty awesome. It was called Soothsayer, and that actually got an art form review. And I was so pumped because it was like my first big project back in LA. And I was like, all right, so what I'm doing, like the direction I'm going is where I should be going. You know, like the paintings, the way I'm thinking about space, the way that I'm addressing space, you know, my choices all had intention and reason and purpose, and it just felt really good, you know. And I wasn't following any trends or any other kinds of artwork I was seeing. You know, this is the time where like Art Viewer and Contemporary Art Daily and like those, like all those kind of art blogs were like, really big, and it's like everyone was kind of chasing to get like a little feature on these websites, and I don't think it was just a different time.
Yeah, and it feels good to get that validation, right? Like I hear from so many people that go through kind of similar experiences to you, especially after MFA program, where things just don't go the way that they expect them to. But then you come back here and you decide to devote your practice and create a studio practice, and then to get that validation when you're kind of self-sustaining and doing it that way.
Yeah.
Really important.
So when I was in SF, at the end, I was at the bottom of like, I was at the bottom, I was like not doing good, So after coming back and seeing when you put the energy out there, it comes back at you, in like a really beautiful and magical way, So then I started breaking out of the vignettes, and this is just kind of some earlier paintings. I started doing like the window motifs and the doors and the solitary objects, and those objects would then be included into the installations later. So, it allowed me to be like, okay, I've got a really good foundation. I really know where I'm going with the direction of how I build exhibitions. So let's expand my vocabulary, and so that's what I started doing. This also shows just how the studio is just kind of like changed,
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of things were like in motion at this time, and you were like, thinking about it in various different ways. Walk me through this image.
Yeah, so this is the memorial at Gila River, which is an internment camp that my grandparents were at. And this is my brother. So this was actually a research project trip for his artwork. He wanted to revisit the internment camps that our grandparents were at. There was two, and they were on Indian land or native land as well. So we had to get permission from the native tribe for us to go visit the space, and for us to reconnect with the past experiences of our grandparents. And so this is us at the kind of memorial that they have. Now this image is a water tower foundation, and my grandfather, when he was at the internment camps, they gave people different jobs, like you work in the mess hall, you do this. His was to watch the water tower. So he was actually standing at this water tower on the top of this hill where this foundation was. There's a big water tower, and that was his job, was to just guard it, and it was really heavy for me to like go on this trip with my brother and go to this place. Like, my parents never took us to this place, and like my grandparents definitely didn't care to go back, so it was like, me and my little bro hitting the road for this like cool brothers trip. And I just had this moment where I was like, this is like really wild that like, I'm standing in the spot that my grandfather was forced to be for, over 4 years or almost 4 years. And in this like harsh desert landscape, and just, just the tragedy that they went through, and then, just losing everything. But at the same time, this is where my grandparents' relationship blossomed in their romance. So during this like dark, terrible time, they were able to like find love and happiness, and like that was one of those moments that really hit a chord with me, because that's what I was painting, or that's what I was thinking about in my paintings.
Yeah.
Next slide. So this is like the landscape. So all in this area that's undeveloped, not the farmland, but this area in the front that looks a little bit more undeveloped. That's where all the barracks were, and they were in different like gridded sections. And when you walked on this landscape, there was like foundation pillars still there, like the little like stumps, like
I can see them kind of in the photograph. Yeah,
from all the from all of the barracks, and you would see like steps from the barracks and like old nails and stuff, because the barracks were made out of wood. So after the camps were closed, like the native tribes went there and disassembled all the barracks and used all the materials. So all that was left was just like tons of nails and random pieces of concrete everywhere. And then the next slide. So where we were standing at the water tower, I'm pointing the general area of where my grandmother's barrack was. And, you know, I was just thinking to myself, like, you know, my grandpa was like up on this water tower, you know, thinking about my grandma, and, you know, he could see where she was staying. And I thought that was like kind of beautiful narrative, you know.
Yeah.
He was also a craftsman. Like he liked carving and like making things with wood. So he would make these like small figurines that he would like carve for her and give to her as gifts. And like my family still has a few of these artworks that he made while he was in camp. So this trip made me think. Let's stay on this for a second. So this trip made me think. It reconnected me to my family history. You know, like the first show, the one with all the purple light, you know, that was more of an open narrative where I was thinking about my experience coming from SF and feeling like, you know, climbing back into, you know, a better state of mind.
Yeah.
And from this experience of the camps, I worked on another project where I was thinking about finding love in like hard places, you know, and I was thinking about like incarceration. And so the next slide, next one. Yeah, so there's this bird cage, and I have this mirror, this vanity mirror, and the hands holding. Here, go to the next slide. So I was kind of thinking about like, you know, like childhood stories of like the princess being locked in the tower and then the knight in shining armor coming to rescue her. And that's kind of what I was thinking about with this show, you know, is like people being far apart and working so hard and going on like a crazy adventure to like get back together again, and almost like freeing somebody from that, you know. Like I think that's what my relationship with Karen was doing for me, was like opening up all these like new doors and windows to like, you know, sounds corny, but to my heart, you know, that made me like really excited about life, you know, like I was stoked, you know, like she came with me on this trip. This is in Chicago. And, you know, and I was thinking about my grandparents for this show, you know, so it's almost like a version of like what this like cell would look like, you know. So there's like the bird cage with the window open, with the door open, and then the windows open with the smoke signal coming out of the window with the little vanity. Next slide. And then this jail door was like open, and you know there's a painting with like the holding hands, and it's like making an escape. So I was thinking like, you know, even through the toughest of times, you know, love wins. And you know, I just really loved that narrative. It was really uplifting to me. It's just what I was going through in my life, you know. I was like really stoked and happy with where I was. And you know, we eventually moved in together. Yeah. And we found a little spot in Chinatown that we lived at. And yeah, let's keep going because I want to show like how things, yeah. So here's like, this is also how I'm building the exhibition. So this one, I painted the walls, did the lighting, I had the candles included, and I carpeted the floors. And I really just wanted to create a mood, you know?
Yeah.
I really loved how Terrell's works always evoked a mood with the simplest decisions that are also pretty complex, you know, like these shaped rooms and just this one color light gradient going into this other color light. It was very like Rothko to me, but like walking into a Rothko, you know? And so I want to do something similar to that, where you walk into the space and it evokes an emotion, and it's an emotion that is like tailored, you know, to to that specific exhibition. Like, what do I want the people to feel? And like, how do I want them to like enter the work? How do I want them to like sit with the work? You know, like what connections can be made? And I also love the fact of having objects from previous shows in future shows, because I really love the idea of like legacy, you know, and like lineage. And like when I worked in the movie industry for a short period, or not really movies, but like, you know, commercials and stuff like that, you know, everyone who's an artist ends up working in like
Production design.
at some point, you know, grabbing props or just driving a truck or anything. But the thing about these props that are really cool is that you look, when you check out these props and you rent them for different like productions, they'll have like a list of all the things that these props have been in, you know? So I really love that. And I wanted to be able to kind of fold that back into the work, where it's like I can have my visual vocabulary that I'm building and bring back objects and symbol, or bringing back symbols and images back into paintings and folding them back into the story. But I want to be able to do that in the space as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't always have to like make stuff new. It's just what context am I showing these works in, you know, like.
I love that idea, especially because that comes across a lot, I think, with different colors and things in your work as well. So thinking about like the 3-dimensional and the space that you're creating, that's really interesting.
So then what I did was, after that show, you know, I was thinking about my family history. And then when I was coming back, that's when I got my space in Chinatown. And it was like, it was so amazing, because it's like, we were like looking for spots like crazy, you know, and like we didn't have very much money. And we're just like, all right, we need to find a deal. We need to like, we were driving everywhere, and she was staying at her mom's place. I was still staying at my parents' place, just trying to like, and we just like are so eager to like live together and like start like our life together, you know? And, you know, that's really special. So we found our spot in Chinatown, and I ended up starting to paint my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So this like, so the one on the left kind of shows how I start paintings, and they all just start with a sketch, you know, they all start with a sketch just like that. It's all drafted out by hand, and then they're all just hand painted. I just go in there and I just paint my layers, and I cut back, and I'll paint it by hand, you know. Like the framework on some of these paintings are taped, but most of the elements on the interiors are all hand painted. And that's like a technical thing that I'm really into, is just how precise and how perfect can you make the image, and how, and for me to hide my hand, you know, like no gesture, no brush strokes, just like this perfectly manicured thing. And it's kind of like one of those Zen gardens or like a bonsai tree or something, you know, like I was just really trying to like hone in on the technical skill. That's just how I've always painted, you know, it's just the kind of person I am. I'm super like organized and detail oriented, and like, you know, I come off as like super like, you know, perfectionist, but you know, it's just how I am, you know. So yeah, so I started painting the neighborhood, and I was also moving. Oh, this is cool. I've always lived on the west side. I'm from the west side. I'm like I grew up in like the Mar Vista area, but I grew up like hanging out in Venice. So I was like always a west sider. All the homies I kicked it with were from the west side. And the only time I would go out to K-Town was just to like meet up with some homies once in a while. But like, you know, I was mostly on the west side. But my family, before the internment camps, were living in Boyle Heights most of the time, because Boyle Heights used to be a Japanese community. Right now it's like a Latino community, but it used to be a very like lush like Japanese community. And you know, thinking about contrasting now, where there's only one Japanese owned like sushi restaurant on First Street, you know, it's like barely hanging on, but it's like an amazing family run place. But this was the first time I was like living on the side of town that my grandparents were living.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's crazy, you know? Like I'm in Chinatown, New Chinatown, and I could see across the river to where like my grandparents grew up and where my family cemetery plots are in Boyle Heights. Um, so for me, like that was also a homecoming to be able to connect with that, the geography of where my family was based.
Yeah.
And so I started painting that. You know, I just started painting that, and I was thinking about time and you know the life I was building with my girlfriend, and you know all of our hopes and dreams together. And
I imagine with the way that you paint as well, you had a lot of time to think about.
yeah, dude,
Video,
I had so much time.
you're just thinking about it. For
Yeah,
sure.
and I also wanted to bring in because like the images I was painting before were way more accessible images, you know. So it'd be like castles, you know. It's kind of like framing it more in connection to maybe like folklore and like stories that we grew up on, you know, like nursery tales and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
uh,
I studied children's literature in school, so that might be another reason why I was so deeply connected to your work. Um,
mhm.
I kind of wrote about how it's all written for adults, like all of these symbols and all of these signs that are inherent in these things that are seemingly for young people is really for all of us older people to unpack and to think about on a deep level, you know?
Mm-hmm. You know that book, Goodnight Moon? So
Yeah.
like the illustrations from that book were like super big for me, you know, and I love that. And there's also this book of like old Japanese woodblock prints, and I would just flip through that when I was younger, and I just loved how like things were laid out, and I think that's how I get this kind of like flat, layered perspective kind of feeling. Um, so next slide. So I started bringing in images from my city and and kind of giving them their own meaning, just how like you know a clock gets the time like once the clock isn't a clock anymore, it's like the symbol of time, you know, or like an owl is no longer an owl, it's a symbol for wisdom, you know, and like a turtle becomes, it's not just a turtle, it's a symbol for longevity,
Yeah.
you know. So like I was like, okay, so what about um these helicopters, you know, these blackbirds flying in the sky, you know, like it's oppressive to me, you know, it's like they're just flying over the city and shining their lights. And it was like really annoying because the house that I was at was like underneath where like the helicopters would leave the police station and go towards like Echo Park and Hollywood and stuff. So they would just like fly over our house all the time. And so, you know, I wanted to bring that kind of narrative in there, like the darker, you know, the darker, more haunting um, parts of living in LA.
Yeah.
And then you still have like the smoke rising from this apartment, you know, and like the night lights and the palm trees. So I was really like expanding my language, but primarily focusing on like LA's language, because the
Yeah.
show that I was building up towards was, it's called Sunsprawl, and it was a collaboration between myself and another artist in LA, Mario Ayala, where we were making a homage to Los Angeles, like a love letter to LA. And being back in Chinatown, like I had a really amazing community that was cultivated there. A lot of artists hanging out. There's a bar that I completely was in love with, and like the people that owned it owned my house.
Oh,
You know,
that's cool.
so the house that I lived in, the owners also owned Hop Louie. And so like the bartender at Hop Louie, Sean, rest in peace, he was like, he just kind of like brought me and my friends in, you know, we were a bunch of knuckleheads. So like it became kind of like our home, you know, for like all my friends, all my girl, you know, Karen's friends, you know, it's just like a place for everyone. And also like the art community would hang out there and stuff like that. Um, so anyways, I'm getting off topic.
I think that that's really great, given what you were saying earlier about that experience, you know, and you coming back here and then building that community. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's really great to hear.
Yeah. So this is like, this is just an image that shows like how my paintings look. So I paint like on acrylic on prime canvas, and they're on panel, and I work flat most of the time. And like growing up in LA, you would see car chases all the time, on the TV, and I wanted to bring that perspective into these works. You can keep going. And so this is one of the paintings called it's called Birds, and it's like the window, the locked window on the left with time ticking, and like the helicopters like searching the neighborhood, and then the top right corner you have the helicopter on fire, which is kind of like, you know kind of the middle finger to the police, I guess, or just oppression, and then the bottom right, which is like, the car that they've been chasing with the spotlight on it and the doors open. So it's like, they're out running away. And it just felt like, it's kind of that feeling where you always feel like you're running,
Mhm.
and like, I talk about this with my wife at times, where it's like life is like you're always pushing forward, it's like, and if you take a break, you're already like behind, and like when you're trying to build something like a family, and it takes a lot of work, it also doesn't take a lot of work, it just happens on its own. But I was these were like echoes of like my grandparents experience,
Yeah, for sure.
like this is Karen. She's gonna hate that I showed this photo, but this is her like helping me in the studio. And she was like, she was there, she was helping me paint the paintings. I had so much work like going on at the time, because at this time I I quit my job at the gallery, and I got a job as being a warehouse manager for art collection. And I was just a warehouse dude. So I had a warehouse. I had like, I was the head manager guy. So I would just carry around a clipboard, and we would just like go do our daily tasks. And it was really, really easy, like I'm not building anything for anybody. I'm not building any art for anybody, or like I'm not making art for the artist, I'm just making it for myself now. So my time became more focused in the paintings. And I think you can see that with the paintings, it became more involved, it became bigger. I got to think about the content a lot more. And I was building two exhibitions at the same time. So I was building the show with Mario, but I was also building a solo exhibition um, for a solo presentation project in Hollywood. And so for that show, I was making something completely different,
Yeah.
So this is just a shot of the bar. So what I did was, in the exhibition, is I built a recreation of Hop Louie in the space. And we had a program of a program of events. So we had a poetry reading, we had like a video screening, we did a jazz night, and at the end of the exhibition, we were going to do a publication release that kind of like cataloged all the events.
Yeah.
And inside this space, I had Sean from Hop Louie run the bar. So he was actually making scorpion bowls, same exact recipe at Hop Louie, and we decked out the inside exactly like it. It had a TV, and we had the bar stools, and it was like red and kind of shitty, and like, but it was really awesome. And we had a video that was like replaying like Dodger games and like OJ Simpson chase, and like, just like all these like iconic LA like newsfeed things. But this was right after Hop Louie got closed. So it was like, again, it's like you lose something so central to like your community, and it's gone, and it's like we didn't really even get to have like a proper goodbye. So I made this space so that we can all get together and, hang out with Sean mostly and make something special. Also, the old man, um, who helped co-run Hop Louie, he passed away. So, you know, Sean wanted to like do this in homage, you know, in respects to him, you know.
Yeah.
So after that show, this kind of shows how the production value or the production on my work went up, you know?
Yeah.
So one thing that I've always done as an artist is whenever I made any money off of art is I just put it back into my art. I don't know why. That's just how I am, you know? I build things. So I like to like build things and, you know, you build something and then it exists and then someone supports that and then you get financial support in return, and I just put that back into the practice and it makes me like grow and grow and grow, you know. So you remember those like small candlestick holders in the first show from like 2016? I think the biggest one was maybe like 3 feet tall, and now I'm making actual candlesticks holders with candlesticks on top that have like wax dripping on the top. The tallest one is like 10 feet or something ridiculous, you know. And me as the maximalist person that I am, I like didn't just make 2. I made like freaking so many of these things because the space that I was like trying to tackle was huge. And we'll look at those images in a little bit, but like the space was really, really big. So, and I was bringing in neon elements into the whole thing, and you could see the painting in the background. Like the level of the production just kept growing.
Yeah.
And at this point in my life, okay, so at this point in my life, with the Sunsprawl show, the one with the Hop Louie bar, so that was a difficult time in my life because it was really fun because Karen and I were living together and we're doing really good. I changed my job, so it became like a little bit more freedom for me to do more of my artistic practice. Karen had a job. She was doing her like fashion photography stuff, which is really cool. But her mom got sick with cancer. And it was around this time where it was really hard for us, you know, like she already lost her father earlier in her life. So seeing her mom sick was like terrible, you know? And so while I was building the show, she was actually at the hospital, like helping the family, you know? And you know, that made me work even harder because I wanted to provide for Karen and her family and like, you know, in terms of like support, you know, because Karen and I had dreams together that I wanted to see us getting to, you know? So yeah, I really was just like, I got to make this art thing work. So that's what I was thinking about, you know? It's like, we got to make this work. You got to make this work. Your next slide. So that, like on the left, I was learning new things like neon, bending, you know, and then on the right is me doing the exact same thing that I've always done, which is like installing art, building exhibitions. This is me putting together, like installing the neon on these new sculptures. And these are all like new, it's all pretty new to me, you know, like I've never lathed big wood objects that had channels running through them and electrical and hiding the transistor on the bottom. But this is what I've always done is like, an artist is like, hey, Greg, I want to make this crazy thing. How do I do it? And I'm like, okay, let's start here. This is where we go. This is what techniques you need. We got to find the fabrication people to do it. We might have to piece out that fabrication to save a little bit of money because it might be more expensive than you know, just the whole thing. You deal with that all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
I noticed when I came to your studio, I was really like excited because there was so much going on and there was like so many different elements. And then, you know, you've recently expanded upon it, which we'll get into and all of that. But it's really refreshing for me to see people that still want to challenge themselves. That's still like, you know, every time that you make something new, it seems like you're essentially adding a new element in every time. And in one way, that's a challenge for yourself. So a lot of people are scared to do that. They're just like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with what's already working. But I think for you, like it works when you do it. So why not continue to challenge yourself in that way? And I also think, going back to talking about some of the things that we've talked about, it's important when you're addressing these personal things and you put personal elements of it in it. If you want to continue doing that, you have to do it in a way that's refreshing for yourself, because there's a little bit of labor, like emotional labor, that goes into this type of stuff. And you've already hit on that with some of your experiences and things like that. So it's really great to hear. And it's definitely great to see in your studio how much you got going on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like how my personal experience echo into the work is I've been like nourishing that more and more, in my practice.
Yeah.
And then this show ended up being like really incredible. So let's look at the next slide. So this is the final final product from like all the different facets in my practice. There's the painting, there's the sculptural aspect, there's the installation treatments, there's the execution of that, the lighting, the like and like the controlled lighting around the paintings and how everything's laid out. And I couldn't get to this point without having like the experience as a curator, the experience as a fabricator, builder, like production manager. Also, I wouldn't have been able to do this without having like the organizational skills of a warehouse manager to like know where the works are, the size, the dims, the shipping, like all that back end stuff. And then the artist, like,
where did this one take place?
Oh, this one was in Hollywood. It was like a project. It was a month-long project in Hollywood. It's called Hollowed Ground, and it was a solo presentation. And then in that doorway on the right, there was actually an area where they did like a pop-up chef situation, so people can like come see the show, and then there's like a curated meal.
Cool.
It was like a new approach to like art activation.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go to the next one. And so this was kind of like, I wanted to show the transition between day and night. And you can see like in those arch paintings in the background, it's like daytime blue, the middle one is pink, the last one is purple, like the transition of time. Mm-hmm. And I went back because this show was the one show that was up before was more LA based. And with this show, I wanted to kind of touch back on that more playful childhood stories, like with, like the Toad Frog, and we have Swan Lake, just bringing in different stories, because this is meant for a slightly different audience, and that's another thing that I think about is like the demographic that's going to encounter these works, like how are they going to access them? And since most of the people were coming from an entertainment sector, I wanted to draw inspiration from stories that they can connect with versus like my personal LA story, which they don't have access to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think later on down the line in your practice, that's something you want to explore more? Like this idea of like site-specific type work or things of that?
Yeah, totally. I think if I were to do something in like Asia or Europe, or if I did like a special project, that it would be tailored for that audience. I think that's what we do as curators, right? Like you curate your own space a specific way, but when you get asked to curate at another space, it's like you have to take in the architecture of that space. You have to take in the history of that neighborhood. You have to take in the history of the building, the project itself, the artist community that surrounds that space. There's so many different spaces that are all leveled on, layered and weaving into one another. And it's like, how do you do something that resonates with all of them without leaving any of them out,
Yeah, definitely.
And this was also a hard time because during the course of this show, my wife's mom passed away. And that experience was also really hard because I was working so hard on these shows that I felt like I really needed to be there for her more, but I couldn't because like physically I just had to like put together this show.
Mhm.
And it just made me really think. It's like you're doing this for your loved one and for your family. But when you're working so hard on something for them without even being present, like what's the good in that? Like what's better? What's, you know, where does it all fit? Like how do you make it work? And this, it's that duality of like, you know, good and bad, you know, like it can go both directions. You know, most of the time it lives in the middle in the gray area. And you know, I went to go visit my mother-in-law in the hospital, and I had plans to propose to Karen. So when I went there, I brought some gifts, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be good. Karen's been down there like for weeks now, just like making sure everything's going well. And when I showed up, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And there's some family there, and her spiritual advisor was like, you know, this is like the best time to propose. So I I proposed to Karen during the day, and I wanted to make sure that Karen's mom knew that she was wanted that I had her blessing, but also that, you know, I was always going to be there to take care of her daughter. And Karen is like the youngest of like 7 kids or something like that. So, you know, Karen has a lot of siblings, but she was the youngest one. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, her mom knew that she was okay. So I proposed, and it was really like, you know, it's really cute. Everyone was happy, but it was kind of in this like rough circumstances because we were in the hospital, you know. And then later that night, you know, she passed away. She transitioned, and that was like so hard for both of us because it's like this beautiful union, you know, is like shadowed by loss, you know. And you know, in one way I felt honored to be able to have that experience and share that experience with her mom, you know. But it was also like I felt like she could finally rest knowing that like Karen was going to be taken care of, you know. And that was a really hard moment for me because it made me realize like, you know, everything that I'm doing is for her, you know. and and like our future together, you know. And like it made me really like think about like artist ego and like what I'm doing this for. And you know, you want to be a great artist, you want everyone to know your art, but really like what are you doing it for, you know? And like for me it became to like I'm doing it for like my family and my future, you know. Like that's what energizes my practice, you know. That's what I've been doing it for this whole time. And now at this point, now I'm engaged, you know. And you know, I'm starting this new life with my lifelong partner who I met in high school at Cal Arts at that art school, you know, when we were like 16 or something, you know. And yeah, you know, it's like you just got to push through, you know. It's like in the difficult times, you know, beautiful things can happen, you know, happiness can be found, just like my grandparents in the internment camps. Like they they were incarcerated for something that they never did, or and you know, they experienced some really harsh realities of living in the United States, you know. And which many people have, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I thought about with this show, is that accessibility to these stories is really important, because in the end we're all one kind, you know. We're all humans, we all have human experience, we all deal with loss, tragedy, sickness, you know, sadness. We all have had the lows, we've had the highs, and that's something that I wanted to really cultivate in the work. And after this exhibition, you know, I now knew what I was doing, making art for.
Yeah.
You know, it was outside of myself, you know. And I knew what my work foundation is now, you know, and I knew what I wanted to talk about in the work. So this show was like a tipping point. And after this exhibition, I was reached out by a number of galleries. We're like, hey, we want to do something with you. Like, let's hang out, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I did some studio visits. And, you know, from all the experience or from all the feedback I've heard from other artists that are like more kind of set up than I was back then, it's just like, take your time, man. You know, you're going to find people that you like to work with, you know. And I ended up working with a Not Epic gallery and her director Stefano, who's like, they're both really great, close friends now, and we were able to really like think about the work and how we wanted to introduce it into the, I guess, like gallery mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Which I feel like is such an important thing for you, and any artists like yourself, like people who are going to be watching this conversation between us. You're putting that much intention into it, right? That's such great advice for people to tell you to take your time and to wait, because of the intention that you're putting into it and the subject matter, and all of these different elements that we've discussed. It's so important for you to go about that process in a careful manner. So I'm glad that you found a situation that's working out for you. That's really great to hear.
Yeah, you just know, you just do what feels good, you know? And like, if you do things that feel good but don't end up panning out, it's just like a test, you know? I feel like weaving through life, you know, it all becomes a dance of like, you know, sometimes you take some blows, but sometimes you give some blows, you know? And like, so after this show, we got married, which is like, oh, also during this time, I just want to say that my space, I used to do everything out of one space. It's like 1,400 square foot or 1,200 square foot space. I shared it with an artist, and then I had like my wood shop in my painting area. Everything was like really small and tight, and there's junk everywhere. It was like crazy. And I always found that in these difficult times, in these kind of transitional moments in my life, I always get blessed with like some more space. So shortly after losing our mom, my landlord was like, hey, I have this space open, you know, you mentioned to me if there's more space that you wanted it. And there's this like new warehouse space. And I was like, yeah, let's do this, you know, like let's ride with it. And I was really scared because I was like, oh, how am I going to take on more space? But I built out a couple studios in there, and this is where I ended up like putting my wood shop, you know? So it just shows like my studio was growing. Greg Ito Studio as an identity and as a space was growing. And I was really excited about that. That's us getting on our wedding day. And, you know, we're just super stoked for the future. And I just wanted to talk about this moment in my life was because this moment was really important because one is I was following through with my goals, you know, like I wanted to get married to the love of my life. And this was the moment when I did, you know, and it was also as like kind of happened in tandem with an unfortunate moment of loss, you know. So I wanted to show that through these hard times, you know, good things can come from those. And also props to Karen because this was the time when I was really unhappy with having a full-time job, and I was the warehouse manager and doing my art stuff. So can you imagine building that exhibition, 2 exhibitions that are like a month apart, you know, with tons of artworks in there, sculpture artworks, and you know, building the bar and building this show, and like I just have one truck, and I had one assistant at the time that was new, and a new studio space. Like my head was spinning, and she was just like, "Greg, just quit your job." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, quit your job. I got you." You know, she's like, "I got my job now." She was working at Fashion Nova at the time, and she was like, "We're married now, so I'll get you healthcare. and you just work on your art. And I was like, yeah, but money, like, da-da. She's like, just do it, you know? So she is the one that pushed me to just like go do your art 100%. And that is like something that I will love her forever and ever and ever for, because that's really when things started like going, you know, like when I turned my, like, when I was in the studio, because I would go to work at like 10 in the morning, then I would be there till 5. Then after that, I would go to my studio from 5 to like 10 o'clock at night, 11, 12, even later, 2 in the morning, just to get all the work done, you know? And Karen was there, you know, you saw her. She was painting canvases. She was hanging out in this studio. She was at home alone, you know, and we're going through all this stuff, you know, she's grieving. We're excited about her wedding, you know, we get married, you know, it's just like that, like life is like a roller coaster, you know? Mm-hmm. And when she told me that, I was like, wow, like having that support is like really, really amazing. And that's another thing I want people to know is give your time to people who support you.
Yeah.
Do not give your time to people that you think you should get their support from. You know what I mean? Like genuine support is so hard to come by. You know, somebody's always trying to get something out of everybody, or you're trying to please people because you think that being in line with them or being like cool with them will bring opportunities, you know, and in that way you're not being genuine with yourself. So for me, I just wanted to keep the sincerity of my relationships and the people I wanted to give my time to. And, you know, Karen is obviously one of those people. And, you know, after we got married, we still saw a lot of our friends, but also, you know, as a married couple, we were kind of going off into our own little journey. So like, we weren't seeing as many of our friends as we did before, you know? So let's go on to the next episode. So these are just some photos of some exhibitions I did after our wedding. So this is in Columbus, Ohio. It's called A Swamp Tale. This is a totally different narrative I was thinking about. This is yeah, no, it's okay. Like I just wanted to show like the range of stuff that I was working on. And then I started going into these Tondo paintings. This right here is also just shows kind of like a reflection of things that I was like thinking about. Oh, here's a project I did with in LA and like with this chandelier. So, you know, I was busy. I was like actively like super busy. And okay, so this painting right here, I just want to put this in here because it was kind of like as a result of like the whole proposal experience. You know, it's like the proposal and then, you know, time, like the candle burning, and then you have like your scene in LA with the smoke rising off the mountain. And you know that smoke rising off the mountain could be like a good thing, like a smoke signal, which is very rare, or it's like a omen of disaster with the helicopters and then the car on fire. So it was just kind of like, this was a portrait of like my mental health, maybe, you know, at the time, where it was just like these opposing forces, man, you know. It's like, it really what gives life its dynamic qualities, you know. And it's like, you know, yeah, it's just part of the journey. So
finding the beauty in those things, right? And I love this idea of this being like your version of like a Rorschach test or something, like the various different things that you're going through, because it's expressed very beautifully. And I don't think a lot of people express when they're dealing with those things in this manner. So I think you're hitting on something there for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I started playing around with like different shape panels. So this is when I was starting to work with a knot. And, you know, most of the shows that I did were all like project shows. Like they weren't at like, you know, big galleries. And if they were at a big gallery, it was in a project space. You know, I love how, you know, how when you start out, you're always at like the little kids table, you know?
It's like, here's a room.
Here's the children's table project space, you know? And which is cool, you know? Like that's where people find like the best art, you know? And like, And I felt, so this was the first time where I could work with the gallery entity and have their resources at my fingertips. And it was the first time where I didn't have to run the whole studio by myself.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like the registrar of my studio, the art handler, the warehouse manager, the fabrication guy, and the artist. And I had this, it was just like so crazy. And now I finally had the ability to like lean on somebody, you know, for some support. So they were really pushing like my ideas, and they asked me, they're like, hey, what do you want to do? You know, like what's the first thing you want to do? And I was like, well, you know, instead of us jumping right into a show, let's do like a presentation for a fair, you know? Yeah. And they're like, okay, what fair do you want to do? And the previous year was the first year of Freeze. And I was like, oh, or Freeze LA. And I was like, I want to do Freeze LA. Yeah. Like, it's on the set, it's so LA, like the best galleries were there. I love the energy that was there. I love the back lot. You know, that whole like vibe was like seemed very fitting for me, especially somebody who's like been moved back to LA and it was working like 5-6 years before like tailoring my practice to like be like inserted into the art world. Mm-hmm. You know, like I was always on the peripheral of the art world doing stuff, but this was like, you know, a major presentation, you know? So I was like, man, I really got to come correct with this. So we're really thinking about the work, the level of detail, the stories I was telling. You know, it was really like forming a full vision of like what I was doing with my practice. Like, what world was I building? What histories were involved with that? What currently was I dealing with at that time that pushed the work? What futures did I want to see myself in? What futures were I afraid of seeing myself in? And it was very much this dance between like tragedy and hope, you know, love and loneliness, mm-hmm. you know, like success and failure, you know, happiness and sadness, you know, these dualities, you know. So I painted those in these works. And let's go to the next slide. So this is in progress, you know, but the vignettes, you see the hands breaking the vignettes. They're no longer in the boxes, yeah. You know, now they're kind of like entering through different parts of the painting, you know, but there's still that diagrammatic kind of like moment where there's like this symbol here, this symbol there, this symbol here, this symbol here, but it's all living within this one plane, this one like environment, you know, this one kind of like mental space, you know.
Should I go to the next one?
Yeah, sure. So this shows how this is me building my exhibition again, you know. So on the lower left, you can see some furniture that I wanted to involve because, you know, every booth has a chair and a table, but I didn't want just a chair and a table. I wanted to build an environment for that chair and table. So you see in the back corner with the light under it, there's a credenza that I bought that I wanted to use, and these framed elements. And, you know, I was still very fascinated with like this fire, like this primitive, destructive force that really fueled, you know, creation, you know, it fueled like food and warmth, civilization, mm-hmm. You know, technologies, steam technology. And, you know, it just was like, you know, it's like one of those, it's the spark that like made human civilization like be where it is today, you know. But it's like you can harness it and use it for building, but when it's uncontrolled, it's just like completely devastating, you know. And so let's keep going. So on the left, it shows like the hand painted quality of the work, you know, just the level of detail. All those little dots are actually placed on there by hand. And again, you have the motifs of like smoke rising from the island, and You have the same palette that I've been working on for many years, just dialing it in so that everything has, you know, this like matte, flat, kind of like pastel, chalky quality that I've been working with for a long time. And on the right shows how I process those furniture pieces to look burnt and like decayed.
Yeah, I love that. When I was in your studio, you showed me another version of this, or I think a newer piece that you are working on, thinking about that piece a ton ever since you showed it to me, because I haven't seen anything like that in a while. So
this is the booth, empty, and like I like designed that arch on the left wall, and we like specifically asked for a corner booth so that we can do that. So in a sense, me learning from my experiences to push a space and apply that to my practice of pushing a space. Yeah. Push the space, make the space something special, you know? And, you know, you go into these fairs and people don't really use the space like they would for an exhibition, but this was not really a fair booth to me. It was like a solo presentation. Like I needed to come correct, you know, and like do something that I really love doing. So I was like, all right, let's build this space up. What's the narrative? You know, the narrative is, you know, growing from destruction, you know, and being in LA with the wildfires, you know, and Malibu and, you know, all the wildfires happening and people losing their homes and people rebuilding and the city kind of just going into this like moment of, you know, it feels apocalyptic where the sky is red and orange and, you know, it's just really kind of like dark moments like that. And you hear these like terrible stories, but then you also hear stories of people coming together and helping one another, you know? So I really love that. So I wanted to make this show very much about LA because one, I'm representing Los Angeles in Los Angeles with my Los Angeles gallery, you know, and they're also just been in LA doing their thing for a while. So it was really important for me to do that. So let's go to the next slide. And this is how I was transformed. So I installed the light on the outside. We have the paintings on the inside and the outside of the booth. We have the furniture in the middle and it's like the flood is rising, you know, pressure is building. The flood waters are rising up. The flames are above, burning down. You see the credenzas burnt. All the frames are burnt. The table's burnt. You know, the imagery is just like fires running reckless, but also like growth. You know, you see the flowers growing from below, and
I love this idea of disrupting the traditional art fair booth. I saw this presentation. I went to Freeze. It was like one of the last things I did before we all haven't been able to see, you know, art for so long. And what was really great about this presentation is the only other person that was doing something similar to this was James Terrell, and you mentioned him a little bit in the influence that he has on your work. He had a pretty immersive booth at Freeze as well, but it was only just one element. So to think about all of the elements, like the chairs and all of these things, and how you're thinking about that, it's that philosophy that you were just saying. How are you going to work the space? Like, what are you going to do to the space? And that is no matter what it is, if it's an art fair or something like that. I would love to see what would happen if they gave you one of those outdoor kind of things that they do for people at Freeze, where you can just kind of
doing like public installation and projects and like other programming like that is like, you know, it's fun for me. It's like you get an opportunity and it's like, what do you do with the opportunity? It's like, let's make the best of it. Let's do something really, really special and unique, you know? And like the fair, I put gels, like you see on the top, like middle, like light, I put some gels on there and they were kind of like giving me giving me a hard time for wanting to do all this stuff. Cause people don't ask that. They're like, oh, can I do this? And can I carpet and screw in this thing and paint all this stuff? And like, they're just like, dudes, like, why are you doing all this stuff? And I'm like, well, it's because it's like, this is going to be the most best thing, you know, in the fair. Come on now. Like, I need your support, guys, you know?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, when you're thinking these things, and they are maybe a little bit extra. It's like things that other people don't get on board with. I'm kind of just like, how are you all not thinking what I'm thinking? Like, you know what I
Yeah, I'm like, come on now, let's get some camaraderie going, you know.
Yeah.
But it changed the space like dramatically, you know, and it's like it was at the far end of the fair in like the LA section. And when people reach the end of the booth after going after white booth, after white booth, after white booth, after white booth, they get to the end and it's just like this color-filled booth with the carpet and everything. It's just so it just envelops you, you know. It's like it's very immersive, and it still kind of has that white wall quality to it, but it was changed enough for it to be pretty like experimental, I feel like, in especially in that space. Let's go to the next documentation image. So that's like the booth in all of its glory, and I was really, really proud of it.
I love the
but it's just like all the other exhibitions, how they were built, you know, like I have my paintings that kind of storyboard, you know, like what's going on. And then you have the elements in the sculpture elements in the space that are echoes from the painting. So you see the chair in the painting and the keyhole shaped, it's on fire. And then you see a version of that chair, very similar, standing in the space, half burnt, you know? And then you also have, like, in that same keyhole painting, you have the lamp on a post on the left side on fire. Then you have the lamp on the left, like, completely, like, burnt to shreds, you know? So it's like this shift of perspective is, like, really amazing, because that's how it lives in, like, a dream world, right? It's like you're first person, and then you're, like, second person, and then you see things from a bird's eye view, and it's like you're experiencing it all, but it's all from you're getting hit from all these different angles, but it's all like related to this one stream of consciousness almost, you know? So I like doing that, you know? It's like, what's this in this painting? Then you look at the next one, like, oh, I see a connection there. And then you look down, you're like, oh, look at the water. It looks like the water in this painting. And like this chair, it's the exact same chair as that chair. And like, you know, I really love like when people walk into an exhibition and they spend time in there. Quality time. They spend quality time. They go in there and they don't want to leave. They just like I've had shows with the carpet and the lighting, you know, like that hollow ground shows. People came in and they just like took their shoes off and like sat on the ground and just like, we're just hanging out. And I was like, I didn't really like, like the operation of the show, I wasn't like wanting people to just like go relax and just like really like soak it in, but it was beautiful to see people doing that. And I was like, this is really amazing. You know, like when you have people spending, you know, 20, almost 30 minutes in a booth at a fair, that's pretty good, you know, like at least for me. Like most people breeze through, they barely even step inside the booth, you know, but they were like really like hanging out, sitting on the chairs, looking at the paintings, looking at, you know.
It creates this really like amazing pathway into what you do and as an artist. And that's one of the things that I really love about our gallery. What I'm really missing about not being open right now is when people do want to spend a bunch of time in the space, that's usually because they have some kind of questions or things that the work is making them think. And in our space, which is really great, is people always want to ask those things. Like they always want to ask questions of us and things of that nature. And I felt the same way when I saw your work. So that was one of the reasons why I reached out to you to try to do this program and just to meet you. Cool. So that we can start to have a relationship. Because I had so many questions about the way that you work and things like that. So you've definitely shared a ton of that with us so far.
Awesome. So wait, let's go back to the back slide really quick. The last one.
One more, here we go.
Yeah. So this was February 2020. So during this time, man, I was like, yes, I made it. Like we got through all this stuff together, honey. Like Karen, like we were doing this, you know, like all these trials and tribulations and everything, the ups, the downs, the grief, the loss, the happiness, the celebrations, the project shows, the random projects, the 2-person group show, you know, everything, you know, just the whole moment of just like us, like just just working through it together as a couple, you know, as a team. And we got to this moment where it was like, freeze, it opened, the booth sold out, people were going nuts over the paintings, you know, like we were able to place the paintings with some really amazing collectors, some collections, like, you know, things I've always dreamed about, you know, because like that Hollow Ground show and the other shows, I didn't really sell very much, you know, like I was just making these crazy shows. And I almost thought that doing these immersive shows were hindering on my sales because like people couldn't see the work on a white wall above their couch or something. So it's like there was harder buys. Maybe it was the scale. I don't know. I was always like, why is it hard for me to like generate sales when I'm putting so much time and energy into the work and people are connecting with the work? The conversations I had with them about the work, they were hitting on notes spot on. They're like, are you thinking about this and this and this with your work? And I'm like, yes, that's great. Like you're getting it, the access, like you're making the connections yourself. Everyone was like doing that. Everyone was clicking in their own head, but the sales just weren't there, you know? And so with my gallery support, and them like kindly like sharing their resources with me, like when we're collaborating on this together, it like started like a whole other sense of a wildfire for the work and getting a lot of support. Now, with this being said, it was February 2020. Everyone's like, 2020 is gonna be our year, you know, clear vision, like clarity and like new me, you know. You remember all that stuff, dude? Like new year, new me, you know. And
It was definitely January 2020.
And I was like, yes, like February, hell yeah, you know, I got this. I got the, you know, the booth. Now it's like way more people are trying to hit me up to like work with me and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is dope. And then March hits, and one of my close friends unfortunately took his own life, and like he was dealing with like some personal stuff, and it was like really difficult for all my groups of friends. And I was just like, man, like, you know, like no one saw it coming. So it was like very much a hit to like my friend circle, you know. And you know, I helped organize his memorial and doing the GoFundMe and just doing all this stuff. And it was really hard because like as much as I wanted to celebrate, I like couldn't really celebrate because I was like, I needed to be there for like my family, my friends who are part of my family. And like, you know, we had to like celebrate my friend's life, you know? So we did that. And right at March 15th, our memorial was March 14th. And the next day on the 15th, that's when lockdown started. That's when COVID was like real. And that's when people were like, you remember there was zero cars on the street.
Yeah.
Like
it was really scary.
nothing.
I moved into the house that I'm in right now on March 14th, and it was like a whole ordeal.
Dude,
I feel like I'll never forget that time of my life. And so many people have things like you where it's like, you know, a memorial for a friend or something like that was what was really occupying your mind at that time. And then instantly everything changed, you know?
Right. And like with this booth, we're looking at it right now, and it's like, I'm like thinking about growth and coming from this destruction, but it's also like, it almost ended up being an omen for what was to come, you know? Like I did lose a loved one, you know, and we lost a whole way of life after this moment. And for me, Freeze was like the symbol for that, you know, as much as I've worked so hard my entire life from when I left high school to go to college, all the way up to that moment at Freeze, everything like added up to that tipping point. And right when I got there, man, it's like life just like threw me a curveball. And I was just like, it was hard, you know, but learning from my paintings and like all the meditations and like thoughts that I have while I paint my paintings, because they're so meticulous and they're so labor intensive, I have a lot of time to think about stuff. So, so I was just thinking about, you know, again, what's important to me, you know, and like, what do I want to do? And Karen and I, we wanted to start a family, and Freeze was definitely one of those moments that did. And I talked to Anat, my gallery, about that. And before we started working together, she was like, okay, well, what do you want from me? And I was like, well, the only thing I want to know is, are you going to be able to support my life to where I can have a family and a home? I want to build a home and a family with my wife. And if you can't support that, then, you know, it's not a good fit. I'll have to wait for another gallery. Yeah. And she was like, all right, let's start this conversation, because I can do that for you. And I've done it for myself. I have a family and 2 kids, and I built a gallery, and I support a staff. And, you know, we just see really eye to eye on stuff. So we're able to talk about things like that with transparency. I feel sorry for artists that don't have that kind of relationship with their galleries, because, and a majority of them don't. They don't even know what the strategy is behind what strategy their gallerists have and where their work is going. And you know what I mean? Like, they're just like treated as like a commodity, you know? But like here in my like LA primary gallery, it's like, you know, we approach things more on a family level.
That's so great to hear. There's so many people that are going to watch this that are going through various different things, whatever level they're at in their artistic practice, and they're thinking that they can't reach those things, that they can't. They're out there. It might take work. It's not always as easy for everyone to do those things, but you know, you've shared the various different things that you went through, both professionally and personally. And some of those things for other people, it's like, I'm not gonna do this anymore. Like, I'm gonna move away, or I'm gonna move into something else. You were working as a person that managed a warehouse and all these various different things. It's really
grinding.
Yes,
grinding. Yeah, grinding.
It's really refreshing to hear that in doing that, you can also say some things like, hey, I want to have a family. I want to do this. You know what I mean? And to feel comfortable saying those things is really exciting.
Yeah, it's important. So, you know, anybody who's watching this that doesn't know where they should go or what they should do, or if like this gallery, everyone says is the best gallery in LA, look, those are other people's experiences, you know, it's what your experience that is the most important, you know, like your art might not sell as well or be shown in the light that you want it to be shown at a bigger gallery. You know, you might get more attention at a lower gallery, and they understand your work better, and they can package it better, and they can get you better, you know, shows. You know, like I would just say, just get to know who you're working with on a people level, you know, and you know, just don't worry about what other people are doing, you know, and like what you know, don't compare, just do what fits you. You know what I mean? If you have a gallery that might not be the best gallery, but you work the best with them and they can place your work and you're building new relationships and doing cool shows, like that's great. You know, you don't need to be at, you know, Kordansky or like Gagosian, you know what I mean? Like that sounds awesome, but it just, you might not have that, that clear working relationship, you know?
It's the most important thing.
Yeah. So after this show, I was like, all right, like Karen, we were like, let's build start a family, and let's go to the next slide. So through quarantine, we had our quarantine baby, Spring. So on the left is when she was born. She's born on February 2nd. So now she's like 3 months old. But during quarantine, we had to basically cut ourselves off from everybody, because COVID sickness and pregnancy stuff was like, no one knew what was going on. So she had to completely, no guests, no nothing. Like it was really hardcore, you know, it was like 8 months of like not seeing anybody, you know? And then the picture on the right is her now. And she's so cute.
She is super cute. I've been really enjoying seeing all the photos. And over the past few months before I reached you, like you taking her out to visits and stuff like that, you had mentioned that to me, but I saw you doing that. And I do that as well. Like my kids will be at art practice with me if they can when I'm installing and doing that kind of stuff. And I don't know a lot of people who have kids as well. So it's one of the things, like, you know, seeing that there's someone else who's doing that. And you have this whole studio practice and other things that you're doing. But family comes first, I think. There's been times when I talk to you and you're like, making dinner for your wife or making food for the baby and stuff like that. And all of those things go hand in hand with the work that you're doing also.
Yeah, it became a fuel, you know, like getting married, I was cooking with a different kind of gas, you know, like it was burning hotter and cleaner after I was married because I had more purpose and all my decisions and all my actions had more intention and were more thought through.
Yeah.
And you know, I was really letting go of a lot of baggage that I had too, you know, like really learning how to like mentally sort through like things. And just know what's important. So this was like during quarantine, and about a month before I was working on a so my solo show got canceled. So like after Freeze, I was like, oh, like I'll still do my show. Everything's all good. And then my gallery's like, hey man, like sorry, COVID's gonna bite you in the butt. We're gonna have to cancel your show because your shows are so immersive. We won't even be able to have anybody in the show, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, no. And I was like, all right, that's cool, you know. So I actually did a lot more kind of like activism stuff, like during like George Floyd, and I did some like sign pop-ups, you know, I was just like doing other work outside of like my studio practice. And Freeze I did pretty well, so I was able to kind of like just focus on like setting up my foundation for the family I wanted to build. And so about a week before I was supposed to take time off to be with Karen, my wife, I was like thinking to myself, I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be a dad. Like, what? You know, like you're gonna have to like make more art. You're gonna have to do bigger shows. Like you gotta like really like push it, you know?
Yeah, man. That existential crisis hits at like 9 months, dude.
Yeah, I know.
What have I been doing for the past few months? I got to do a bunch of stuff to get in line, you know?
Yeah, and I finished this like one of the biggest paintings I ever finished. So what we were doing is we pivoted. Instead of doing the solo show, I would do Basel, Hong Kong, because I saw that in Asia there was still a lot of things going on, and people were still like actively seeing art and stuff, and they had a little bit more control in the beginning. And anyways, I was like, all right, let's do Basel. Let's see if we can do something in Asia. So my gallery is like, let's do Basel, Hong Kong. And I was like, okay, cool, let's apply. And we applied with a 2-person booth. And Basel came back and they're like, actually, we want to do a solo booth with you, Greg. Can you send us a new proposal? So I sent them a proposal and I started working on that proposal. They accepted it. And I was like, whoa, they accepted it. This is so freaking cool. Like Basel, this is so amazing. And then what happened was, oops. And then what happened was, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then what happened was, Basel got pushed back. And I was like, oh man, another thing getting changed up. So it was like this very push and pull. But anyways, I needed to increase my space. And the day I was wrapping up, the day after I thought this, my landlord came up to me and was like, hey, I got more space. Do you want to look at more space? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. So she, another unit was available. Let's see, is that the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually a double wide space. Yeah, it's double wide. It's in the same building as me, so it's like within the same kind of building compound. And I was like, okay, and I literally signed the lease like the week before my baby was born. So I signed a lease, and at the same time, I was like, what am I doing? I'm crazy. I'm spending more money, like right when I'm about to have a baby, and I have to build out this place, because look at it. It's like completely like not cool, you know?
Yeah, you put a lot of work into there for sure.
Yeah, and I put a lot of money into it and stuff. I really kind of like doubled down. And I wanted to have like a separate like wood shop area, which I built. And then I wanted to build an extension of my studio space, which then became a art, like a project space. It became a space called Sew and Tailor that I opened with my wife and my friend Stefano. And next slide. And this is what the space turned into. This is what it is now.
Amazing, amazing. And it's been open for about 2 months now, or how long have you been open?
It's only been open for 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Wow. Yeah, 3 weeks.
Yeah, this is the first exhibition. And, you know, at first I wanted to build an exhibition space, or sorry, an extra painting space for me. But, you know, I'm only one person, so I can't paint in both places. And like, I don't have the ability to have a full cranking, like, assistant staff to fill 2 warehouses with.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was like, what do I want to do? And I wanted to reconnect with my community. And because of COVID and the quarantining, and you know, just recently, you know, about a month ago, we started getting vaccines and stuff. It really showed a shift where, at least in Los Angeles and California, that the tides are changing. You know, spring was born. Even her name is like a metaphor for what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Sow and Tailor is the name of the space. And it's like sowing seeds and tailoring them and building exhibitions. And this is the first show of all LA-based artists. And it really connected me to like my roots in the very beginning, back to SF. I kind of went full circle where I was like, let's bring people back into like my creative space and share my resources, you know, help them with their work, you know, give them the resources to build anything if they needed to through my wood shop, you know, any of my resources as a working artist, like talking about collectors and curators and people we should be talking to. And you know what I mean? Like, it became a safe space for artists to have those discussions, you know? And a lot of people don't have that. Like we said before, like a lot of people don't have a space where they can safely, with transparency and sincerity, talk about the art world, the art market, you know, and things like that. So this project space aims to do that, to connect people, you know, people that know each other within the community and haven't shown together before, people that have shown together before but meet new artists. Like, this is a multi-generational show, from established artists like Peter Shire, who's actually my uncle, and from him, you know, like this iconic LA like artist, you know, to younger artists like Tita Whitney Leck, who's based in Long Beach, and she's you know, she's a young artist, like straight out of school. She was doing art assisting and, you know, stretching canvas at the canvas shop, you know. So, and now she's like doing really well. You know, we were able to place all of her works with really amazing collectors, you know. And I love seeing that, you know, and like, you know, and this is a space for cultivating those relationships.
Yeah, that's really great. It was one of the first times that I had a chance to come through the space and see the art. Thank you for showing me. And it was one of the first times that I had been in any art space besides art and practice in over a year. And I was familiar with a good amount of the artists in the show, but some of them, like, I had no idea who they were. And it was really exciting to talk to you about their work because you were so excited about it and you're also an artist. And I also think that there's an element of this being, this is a family run space.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that is really important to what you're doing. I know that your wife is there with doing appointments for people, and you're doing appointments for people that want to come through the space. So I'm excited to have your space in the neighborhood and like around, and excited to see what more you do on this end as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it's for sure. I've you know, when I give people the walkthroughs recently, they're like, man, this is so great. Like, every decision in this show is so thoughtful, you know, like, and I love when people pick up on that, because it's these like really like nuanced conversations in the work. And like, when you kind of turn the volume up by placing it next to another work, it's like pretty awesome when those kinds of things happen, you know, when you allow the artwork to speak for itself versus like relying on an exhibition text to explain what it's about.
Yeah, definitely. You're placing yourself in a long legacy of artists, like amazing artists like yourself, who are also platforming other people, which I think is so important to think about, you know, the space that you're giving these other artists. And that you just mentioned that could be if they need help to fabricate something.
Right. Just like Mark Brackford and Art and Practice, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it's really, you know, like we have to be there for our people, you know, like it's
100%.
really important. So
And
so so these are, this is like a sneak peek of the works that are going to Basel,
yeah,
Hong Kong, and I made these works after Spring was born. So like whilst once Spring was born, we started building the space, and I built it throughout that whole first month. After the first month of Spring's arrival, Karen and I already started doing studio visits because we're like, okay, we got to fill the space. Let's build the show. And Karen, you know, she comes from a different industry, and she's not like super, like she loves artists, and a lot of artists are her friends, and she's part of like the community, but she's not like digging and like how I am with like my curatorial like itch that I have, where I'm like trying to like see things like, so like every little detail and all the what they're thinking about and all this stuff, and for her to get a taste of that, and like seeing her just like really diving into that and bringing Spring along, who's like this big, like literally a little nugget of like amazingness, you know, of magic, coming to these studio visits was like really like special, because I also wanted to have a space where Spring can grow up around art and have a community and people that have seen her when she was little, and you know, and like watch her grow, and for her to just be in an environment that I think would be really nourishing for her. And so these paintings are a continuation of my presentation at Fair, or at Freeze Fair, where, you know, it's about the fires, but it's more about the growth that comes after the fires. So you can see in the clock in the painting on the left, there's the little seedling growing, you know, and then the candle again on the right, which is the more destructive, like time is running out. And, you know, so that was one thing. And then on the right, you could see the like the flame ascending, and in the flame is like a little seed with a growth. So it's a continuation from that story. And you know, these are just really special works because, you know, I'm pretty easy to make the connect the dots, but you know, I'm thinking of Spring, and I'm thinking of new growth, and then I have all these like little seedlings growing in my paintings.
yeah,
And I also have a space called Sow and Tailor, and when you sow your seeds, you know, you're planting them for like that year's harvest. And you know, so again, you know, all these moments in my life um, are really shaping the decisions that I'm making in my artistic practice.
yeah. That makes so much sense. And you know, you have so much going on, and I love how your paintings have become a little bit more maximalist in a sense, right? Like you're throwing more things at the viewer for them to unpack. I'm excited to see where you go in the future with all of this work and everything else that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, this painting with the keyhole, I really enjoyed this painting. I also started doing a lot more imagery with like the metamorphosis of like of the caterpillar to the butterfly, you know, and those phases, you know. And I also think about, you know, Phoenix rising from the flames, and how a butterfly could like act as that Phoenix, you know. And you know, the symbols became more intergrained into the landscape. And then next slide. So this painting is kind of like my it's kind of like the period at the end of a really long essay. You know, it's like the last piece. And this was the last piece that I made before my daughter was born. So this piece, it's called Paradise. And it's like this 16-foot long, 4-foot tall painting. It's multi-panel, 5 panels that all make up one painting. And it's just like the full spectrum of like the years that I spent before in LA, you know, and the lessons that I've learned and everything that I was preparing myself mentally. I was literally painting this for months leading up to my baby's birth. So I was going through a lot mentally, you know, just like what kind of person I am, how I want to carry myself into the future, how do I support my family, you know, like how do I make the right decisions, you know, things burning around me with the wildfires, and then also what's growing beneath my feet, you know. And so this was like one of those moments when I finished this painting. I finished this painting and then I was literally thinking in my head, oh, I need more space. And that's when my landlord the next day was like, hey, I have more space. Are you interested? I was like, whoa, this is so weird how it manifests like on its own, you know? And I just had to jump in and just write it out, you know?
I love that. This is big too. Is this like the biggest work that you've worked on to date? And
yeah, this is the biggest work I've done to date. And now I'm scaling up because I really love, I just love how this painting unfolds. It's so cinematic. It's like when the curtains open, you know, when you're watching like an opera or something, you're just like, you see the whole thing from beginning to finish. You see like, you just see all the connections that I've been wanting to do, you know?
yeah, thank you so much for putting this one in here. This is like a sneak peek that no one's ever seen, I'm assuming. So it's really great to be able to see this progression from the first work that we've talked about in this program to this work here. It's like so many things have changed in your life and in your practice, and that is definitely reflected in the work for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was a special one, and that's me for scale.
Yeah, love it.
Oh, and then I'll end with this photo because this is my wife, Karen. That's Spring in the middle, and that's me. And, you know, I just wanted to end this conversation with a photo of my family because it's what really, really guides me through my life. You know, ever since I very first started like dating Karen and when we first started living together, you know, that set a new level for us. And then, you know, we went through a lot of stuff together and a lot of shows have been made between that period and like when we got engaged. And then we had some tragic loss on the way. And then we continued our journey. We had to like let go of some limiting behaviors, you know, like saying that some things weren't possible and things are possible, and just really had to let go of those like pre-constructed, you know, roadblocks that, you know, are kind of instilled on us, and freed ourselves from that. And then, you know, building up to through more shows, you know, and learning things, and for me to like process through these like these challenges that life brings you, but also all the beautiful moments as well, and using all of that as inspiration for my life, you know, or for my work, you know. My work is my life and my life is my work, you know. And, you know, for me right now, I always look into the past for guidance, you know, and I'm always living in the present and working towards the future. So in a way, all these multiple perspectives and of entering my work, it's just how I enter like my life choices, you know. And it's important for me to like close things on this photo because this is just a very candid, normal photo of us hanging out in the back of the project space. So on Taylor, it's like Karen's there with the baby. We had some friends roll through and a couple like advisory people just to like look at the show. But it was like a really like safe, like beautiful moment where we could just like hang out, you know, and like talk about the work. And like I had some gallerists that had some really major galleries come through, and they're just like hanging out with us and playing with the baby. And, you know, and I'm there like looking like, you know, like a junkie, like painter guy, you know, just like kind of dirty, but it's just like, you know, that's just my life, you know. And this is the portrait of my life, you know. And yeah, you know. And it's really thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you
And
so
giving
much for being here and for sharing so much about your experience and, you know, your family and all of these things. I think it's such a beautiful thing to hear, and it's giving me so much optimism about all the stuff that we do, especially after the crazy year that we've all been through. I'm so excited to, you know, have this conversation with you, but also to continue having the conversations that we've been having. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's amazing how, you know, sometimes when life will give you life will bring things to your attention when they need to be, you know, paid attention to, you know? So that's something with the work that I've always done. And like with the work, I've met really amazing people like yourself that have that same drive and that same love for art. And, you know, these are the people that I surround myself with, um, you know, that just are like really in it and really love what we're doing. You know, just the conversations that we have, I know that you love what you do. You wouldn't be able to do it if you didn't like it, you know? So I just always want to keep cultivating that, you know?
Yeah, man. We're so excited to see